One more episode. How about one more episode about the witch trials? There may be more. I don't know. Whatever mood strikes me. But if you like them, I can continue making them. And this brings us to Spain and Italy. They weren't quite as harsh as Western Europe. Well, let's say Northern Europe, Germany, Scotland, and so forth, when it comes to the witch persecutions. Despite the infamy of the Inquisition, which has become synonymous with trial and torture and tribulation and suffering, it wasn't nearly as bad as, say, Germany and Scotland, who were some of the worst, actually the worst, when it came to witch torture and burning and insane. It was pretty bad. But few realized that the Inquisition in Spain was not about witches. There were actually very, very, very few witches implicated and executed during this time in Spain. It was about rooting out, well, how should we put it? Heretics to Catholicism, I suppose. The Protestant heresy was bad at the time, and Jews and Muslims, many of which would surreptitiously practice their old faith, even though they claimed to convert to Roman Catholicism. And it was more than just that. They were paranoid about plots against the crown and so forth, which were real. You have to remember, at this time, it wasn't 21st century America, okay? And Islam had invaded Spain in the early 8th century AD and had occupied Spain for over 700 years. And it was not the multicultural paradise that the leftist academia would have us believe. I'll leave some links in the description for some good books on that topic. Now, the Catholic Church is certainly not without culpability and not without blame. We all know the history of that. But normally we get one side of the story when it comes to modern academia. Okay? Always remember to ask yourself, what is it they're not telling me? And that's usually more important than what they do tell you. Because let's face it, modern day academia's main goal is to denigrate and smear European history and Christianity as much as possible, and the rest of the world is their victim. Okay? So, that being said, we'll try to stay on the witch topic, though. It could easily go off onto a tangent onto other topics, because this is a very interesting and chaotic point in history. As many people today find it rather easy to cast their judgments and project their worldviews and their personal sensibilities back in time onto people that lived 500 years ago. Frankly, that's goofy in the head, anyone that does that. Look at it for what it is, history, and learn from it. And be glad we're not living like that now. But in some ways, they had it going on more than we do today. As far as Queen Isabella, she was an awesome woman. And any modern secular heathen historian that says otherwise is full of even old Torquemada here. He's infamous for being a sadist, cruel, but unlikely as bad as they've made him out to be. Now, there were some witch trials and witch burnings, although not nearly as many as most would think. Two young girls led a witch hunt. Now, isn't that something? In Spain. Now, have you ever seen the movie The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp? Aristide Torquia, burned at the stake in 1667 for being in league with the devil. He kind of rewrote the Demoniality, the book that was uh, allegedly written by Satan himself. Say of 100,000 caught by the Inquisition, only a few dozen were executed for witchcraft. The branch of the Roman Inquisition in Venice focused more on ritual magic than common maleficia, likely because inquisitors relied on traditional views on witches. There's an interesting book, Demoniality. Well, we've all heard of bestiality. Well, demoniality means just what you think it means, sex with demons. And if you're interested in this book, I suggest getting that copy right there. I'll leave a link in the description. It's by Absinthe Publishing, and they publish some pretty cool books. Great graphics. So the Roman Inquisition, the one in Italy, not Spain, was less harsh than its Spanish counterpart. Only about 100 were executed for witchcraft in 200 years. I mean, that's 100 too many, of course, but still, it's nothing compared to Germany, where they wiped out entire towns and had forests of the burnt. Can you imagine? Dozens, if not hundreds of people burning. So bad that the houses leeward of the fires would be coated with the fat from the bodies burning. Imagine. So in Italy, it was nothing by comparison. So let's watch this scene from the Ninth Gate. The scene with the old men in the bookstore.
Buenos tardes.
Buenas tardes. Pase.
You speak English?
Yes, I do.
I would like to get your opinion on this.
What a habit for a bookbinder.
The Nine Gates, superb edition. Very rare. The perfect copy.
Yes. You used to own it, right?
We used to, yes.
Sold it.
We sold it when the opportunity presented itself. It was too good to...
Too good to miss. An excellent sale.
An excellent buy. Impeccable condition.
Impeccable. Are you the present owner?
No, a client of mine.
I would never have believed she would part with it. Never.
She?
Mrs. Telfer.
I understood that it was Mr. Telfer that bought it.
He paid for it.
It was Mrs. Sturfer who made him buy it. He didn't seem particularly...
Interested.
An exceptional specimen.
Do you think it could be a forgery?
Forgery. Hear that, Pablo?
Oh, I took you for a professional. You speak too lightly of forgeries.
Far too likely.
Forging a book is very expensive. Paper of the period, right inks, too expensive to be profitable.
Still, it can be done.
Of course.
Requires a great skill, but yes, it can be done.
Do you think that could be the case here?
What makes you ask?
My client wishes to satisfy himself on the book's authenticity. His name is Balkan, Boris Balkan of New York.
All books have a destiny of their own.
Even a life of their own. Mr. Balkan is a celebrated collector. He's no fool. He must know this book is authentic.
We know it.
So must he.
We've had this book for years.
Many years.
An ample opportunity to study thoroughly. Printing, the binding, a magnificent example of 17th century Venetian craftsmanship. Finest rack paper, resistant to the passage of time. None of your modern wood pulp.
Watermarks, ink, typefaces. If this is a forgery or a copy with missing pages restored, is a work of a master.
Master.
Yes. Have you studied the engravings? They seem to have some underlying significance.
But of course, here, for example. This one could be interpreted as a warning. Venture too far, it seems to say, and danger will descend on you from above. This type of books often contain little puzzles.
Especially in the case of such an illustrious collaborator.
Collaborator?
You couldn't not proceed very far in your research, senor. Here, look close. And you see, only 6 of the 9 engravings were signed by Aristide Torquia.
Yes. And the other 3?
But this is one of them.
LCF. Who's LCF?
Think.
Lucifer?
Very perceptive of you, senor. Torquia was burnt alive because he wrote this book in collaboration with someone else.
Come on, you can't honestly believe
The man
that
who wrote this book joined alliance with the devil and went to the stake for it.
Even hell has its heroes, senor.
the Compendium Maleficarum. Now, the ninth gate, speaking of the ninth gate, if you notice in the beginning of the movie where Boris Balkan is giving his lecture to the small audience, where Corso goes to sleep, he mentions the Compendium Maleficarum, along with Demoniality Libre by Nicholas Remick is the other that he mentions in closing. Benedetta Carlini, and this poor woman ended up dying in prison, all because she was probably a little goofy. And these goofy authorities would just do whatever they felt like at the moment. Sometimes they would let them go. Sometimes they would torture them and throw them in prison, and all on the whim of the witch judge. Tommaso Campanella, another guy that was captured and tortured as a heretic. Then he was imprisoned, but he got out. The Pope left him out, and he skedaddled to France and never went back, and we can hardly blame him for that. Then the Benedante. This was a group of people who were born with a veil over their head, and they thought that this gave them special abilities. Have you ever heard of that? Being born with a veil? A baby born with a veil over their face? Well, it's the amniotic sac is what it is. But back then, it was considered, well, I guess depending on the culture, it was either considered a blessing or a curse. Born with a veil. Authorities in Castel Nuovo arrested Maria Salvatore, aka La Mercuria. She left the church with the host in her mouth and would use it in satanic ceremonies. Oh, she implicated other witches, under torture, of course. Well, how else are you going to get the truth out of them if you don't torture them? And made unguents out of dead babies. Have you seen the movie The Witch? The one that's only about 5 or 6 years ago came out about the Puritans? In the beginning, the baby gets snatched right from underneath Thomason's nose, literally. When she's playing peekaboo, the baby just vanishes. The witch got her, got the baby, and you see these eerie, creepy scenes. Nothing really, it's done very well. And you see this old hag smearing something all over herself and all over her broomstick or whatever. Well, that's the implication. She made the unguentum sabati, which they would render fat from, well, babies. Render their lord, I guess, and make this salve, unguent, that they would smear all over themselves and it would give them the ability to fly. By the 1700s, though, the witch craze in that part of the world had died out. So, according to the movie The Ninth Gate, 1667 is when Aristida Torquia was burnt. That's actually getting kind of late. It's possible, but kind of unlikely he would have been burnt that late. And didn't they say it was in Venice, Italy, which was one of the areas where it wasn't quite as bad as Spain? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in the movie it was in Venice. And that brings us to the end, folks. Hope you enjoyed our little presentation. It wasn't much, but it was fun, slightly educational.